So this past weekend at the tail end of ESL1 Cologne, a report came out on HLTV.org that essentially stated that coldzera was informing Made in Brazil that he wanted to leave the team and essentially would be benching himself. And apparently this will happen after competing at Blast LA and IM Chicago, which means he will not be playing with the team at the Starlighter Major. Supposedly Zeus is a likely stand-in, as the roster lock for the event had already came into effect a couple of weeks ago. And that's basically the show. That even though that they tried to make a roster change, bringing in Lucas for Phelps, and they obviously went and played with that lineup at their debut, I guess you could say, at ES1 Cologne, they did not do very well at all. That despite some of the tweets that the team has sort of made, bringing Taco back, trying things out with Phelps again, now bringing Lucas in. Obviously, this is after they had tried things out with Tarek and Stewie 2K, after they were having disappointing results, and they've been trying to make all these tweaks, and nothing's really worked, and Cold's finally fed up. And apparently, this isn't the first time that Cold's been fed up, and I think we've already kind of known that. We've already heard hints of Cold wanting to leave at times, and him taking over the in-game leadership at one point, and all these different things that were going on, kind of this power struggle almost happening between Cold and Fallen, perhaps, or just Cold and the organization. And apparently he tried to leave last year a couple different times. Apparently once when Taco had left the team, he tried to leave. When Taco left the first time, they go to Liquid from SK, and then apparently tried to leave it, closer towards the end of last year, whenever they were having some issues. But his buyout was always a really big problem, which I think it'll still be a really big problem going forward, depending on how big it is and how long he still has left on his contract. The other thing that weirds me out about, though, is I am surprised he wouldn't just play the major with the team. Like, if you can't really go anywhere else because the major roster lock's already in, and you're already going to play with them at Blast LA and IM Chicago, according to this report, then I just don't get why he wouldn't just go ahead and play the Starlighter Major and then just start fresh and anew for the next major cycle. That seems like it would make more sense. So I would hope he would just decide to play at the major and not make them feel to stand in. I don't know how much it would matter. But yeah, that does weird me out a little bit. But as far as the idea of Cold leaving the team, or maybe this is even just a play to try to control the team and boot out people like Fallen and Fur and have Made in Brazil build a team around coldzera and Taco and whoever else coldzera wants to involve. Maybe that's another option. I'm not sure what the play is here, if he's trying to truly leave or if he's trying to take the reins of Made in Brazil. Either way, this team looks like it's finally going to deconstruct. We're finally going to see the split up of the core trio of Fur, Fallen, and coldzera that have been together for oh so long. It's really hit its boiling point. And to be honest, I'm really not surprised, because this Made in Brazil team has pretty much done jack shit all year. They've had two good tournament finishes this entire year. That was IM Sydney, where they got top 4, actually beat some pretty decent teams at that event. They were able to beat this Mouse Sports lineup as well as beat Fnatic, so not a bad showing there, only losing and getting eliminated by Team Liquid in the semifinals, so pretty good showing there. And then they had a pretty good showing at the IM Katowice Major. Definitely worth pointing that out. They were able to beat teams like Renegades and IP, actually make it to the semifinals, only losing to Astralis, had a close map even in that series against them on Overpass. So those two tournament finishes, not too shabby. But other than that, they haven't really done anything in 2019. They've had several disappointing finishes, particularly, coming essentially dead last at the CSL1 Cologne event, losing to Big and Fnatic. They obviously didn't really do much in any of the other tournaments they've played in either. Particularly really bad performance at Starlighter Season 7 as far as really big disappointments go. Particularly the ECS Season 7 finals was also a really big disappointment. Basically going dead last at that event, losing the best of 3 to a brand new Complexity lineup with Obo coming in for Stanislaw. So that, combined with ESL1 Cologne, combined with that Starlighter event, there's been some real stinkers this year. Been a couple of times where they didn't get a deep run. They lost a really good team like a Liquid or something, which is understandable. But yeah, just not a whole lot to build off of. They've slowly been falling down the totem pole of the international rankings. They had a couple of cool events at the end of 2018 at EPL Season 8 and ECS Season 6, and the Face It Major they did fine, but they also had their rough times like IM Chicago in 2018 and that Blast Copenhagen in 2018 where they lost every map they played. So there's been a lot of rough times, and the recent rosters they made have not worked out. And I'll be honest, when they brought on Taco and Phelps, I questioned it a lot. If you go back and look at the video I did on the channel when that move got announced, I was very concerned because I felt like Fur hadn't been playing well for a long time. Fallen hadn't been playing well for a long time. Phelps was not looking that great on INTZ, and he certainly looked to really have issues playing well on this team when he had his last months with the team before he got removed the first time. So there was a lot of questions and concerns on whether or not they'd be able to make the lineup work. I mean, bringing Taco, a supportive element who seemed to be able to fill a lot for the team and could bring something back to them, bringing Zeus back as a coach, finally having a coach again, that was the coach for them when they were at their most successful with Luminosity and SK a couple of years ago. There seem to be some upsides to it, but there's definitely some fears that you're basically taking a lineup you tried before that had some success early on and in the middle of its time together, but towards the end really petered out. And so it's always shaky when you try to bring people back and do it over again and hope for better results than kind of how things finished off the last time. And so with all that in mind, I mean, yeah, this main Brazil team didn't really seem to be going anywhere. I mean, yeah, they brought in Lucas. They only played one event with him. You could maybe argue, given more time, maybe they could build something with it. But it's just without them getting players like Case Rado Yuri or some of these guys, other guys maybe from Furia who just got locked in the huge ass contracts over there, which is a whole separate topic. That's pretty crazy. It just seemed like it was really hard for the team to really do much because, I mean, who else are you going to get at this point if you're staying within Brazil? I mean, some of the guys over at Luminosity, maybe, but they already tried Bolts. They didn't work out. They removed them from the team. Bringing Steel back just doesn't really seem to make sense. Like, they're just really lacking firepower on this team. Like, Cold's been the only guy who's been able to perform pretty consistently on this team still throughout all of this, and even his numbers have somewhat deteriorated, but Fallen has not been anywhere near the same type of AWP player as he was whenever this team was actually successful. Fur has been off for a long, long time now. He'll have an occasional event where he does pretty well, but it's pretty rare. And honestly, Fallen hasn't had a really big event in a long, long time at a big tournament. I mean, he's had a couple of big events, but they've been like EPL group stage or like the WESG event at the end of 2018 where he played really strong. I mean, you have to go back to like the Face It Major where he had like a really big LAN performance at a major tournament. Maybe the ECS Season 6 finals at the end of 2018 you could lop in there, but there's been plenty of events where he's really struggled to have any type of impact. And so basically at that point, you have Taku as a support player who's not going to put up big numbers. You have Fallen and Fur not performing very well. So who the fuck's supposed to frag for this team? I mean, Cold, okay, great. That's not going to win you anything. Not when you have so many good lineups out there right now in the international rankings. I mean, most teams have at least 3 really strong fraggers on their team if they're within like the top 10 or top 15, or like 2 stars and a third pretty strong player at bare minimum. And Mid Brazil has nothing close to that right now. Not only that, but they've really lost their way when it comes to their map pool. I mean, I don't even know what their map pool is, to be honest. Like, they've shown some strengths on Overpass, Mirage, and Train a little bit. They've also lost those plenty. Like, they only have like high 50% win ratings on those maps. Overpass is at 60%, which isn't bad. They don't really have like a straw map that's like 70% or something like that, where that's their bread and butter. And they had several maps where they struggled on. Like, they're not good at all in Inferno. That's gone back to the shitter. Their Dust 2, 44% win rate, not great. Their new 33%. Cash was a map they actually were pretty good on, but then that got removed. So, that really hurt them. And then their Vertigo, they've only played it once on LAN. So too early to call on how good their Vertigo is, to be honest. So when you only have like 3 maps that seem somewhat stable out of a 7-map pool, that's not really going to get you anywhere. You can just tell that their play looked sloppier, roles were weird at times. Yeah, things just weren't working out. And so you can understand that Cole would want to either make a decision to leave and go play elsewhere, or maybe try to do some type of power grab where he gets Made in Brazil to get on board with him, and after the major, he builds a team. Maybe he keeps Taco around as a support player. Maybe he becomes the in-game leader himself, and then tries to grab other Brazilians, which, again, I'm not sure who you could really grab out there. I mean, there's a couple of decent players out there in some teams, but again, most of the Brazilian talent that you would want are locked in over at Furia, so it'd be really hard to do much at that point. And so it seems like it would make more sense for him to go join another team, and definitely can't blame him for it at this point, considering how things are going. It feels like, honestly, what's beneficial for all parties at this point is to try to blow things up and just try something completely different, because what they have going on here is not great. Like, you can keep swapping in new fists and force, but the foundation itself at this point seems not to be working, and at that point, you do have to kind of blow things up. Again, they can be somewhat forgiving on some results just because of the quality of teams they were losing to. But again, they've had some real disappointing ones as well, to a point where it's getting a little bit unforgivable. There was a window where I felt like this team really could climb up. Like, a few months ago, Vitality hadn't really stabilized yet. FaZe was going through their transitionary periods. Furia hadn't really built up yet. G2 hadn't really built up yet. There was definitely a window for Made in Brazil to be a really strong top 5 team in the world if they could have gotten their acts together. Obviously now Liquid's a powerhouse. Ents is really built up. Vitality's really built up. Astralis is still, lingering around as a top 4 team despite some of their issues. They still had a pretty decent showing at ESL1 Cologne. You have Energy now looking really strong. Furia's really worked themselves up alongside G2. Mouse Sports looks super, super dangerous with their new lineup. So that window is really closed. Made in Brazil really having I guess you could say, easy access to a top 5 world ranking, or really just any type of notion that they could be that good. They're so far removed from that that it just feels like things need to really blow up. Now, as far as where Cold can go, I mean, the obvious one that a lot of people are talking about is FaZe, right? Because there's always been this talk about him and Nico wanting to play together. FaZe's international team, it will be definitely a new experience for him. I mean, he has some experience, playing as a primary language of English when they were playing with Stewie and Tarek. So they already kind of had a multinational team at that point. So that could make sense, especially if FaZe is looking to make a change after the major. I don't know if they're going to keep Neo on as an in-game leader long-term or not. If they were to bring Cold back, I know Cold has done some in-game leading, so maybe he could take over as the in-game leader or do some type of duo system with Nico. I'm not really sure. So that's an option. Or maybe you keep Neo and you replace someone else to bring in Cold. Maybe you like what Neo's doing for you as an in-game leader and you decide to swap someone else to bring coldzera in. Who wouldn't want Cold, right? I mean, I know he's had his issues recently with his performances, but there's no denying how good of a player and how good of an asset he can be to a team when he's in a better working environment. So I don't think that there's necessarily any real risk in picking him up and thinking that he's going to perform poorly. And honestly, Cold was still playing pretty well through most of the events that he played. I mean, there were a couple events, where he certainly didn't look anywhere near as mighty as he used to, but he never really plummeted to ultra low levels. He was still usually going positive overall, and he would still have several events where he played pretty well, even when they were struggling. Like I Am Sydney, he played super well. There's a couple different Blast events where he looked really strong still. I Am Katowice at the major, he looked really good. So definitely still seems like he's capable of delivering. He needs a new environment to do it in. So FaZe certainly could be the main destination or the most likely. Again, it's all going to come down to his buyout or how long his contract is still with Made in Brazil, or if he decides to try to stay with Made in Brazil and build something and remove like Fallen and Fur or remove one of them or do some type of move there. It seems like that and FaZe are the two most likely options. Another option is to go to Furia. I mean, I think this would have been really unrealistic maybe, 6 months ago, but considering the fact that Furia has worked themselves up to, at times, being a top 5 team in the world and still certainly a strong top 10 team, they have let off the gas pedal a little bit in their most recent events, but you figure you have a lot of talent in Yuri and K. Serrato. Art seems to be a pretty capable in-game leader who can also have impact. If you were to slot coldzera into Furia for either Vinny or Abel J, I'm not sure which one you would pick or what would make the most sense. I think swapping out Abel J probably makes the most sense if you just look at like player performance, but whatever the case may be, Cole could bring a shit ton to that team due to his veteran experience, and there's a lot of talent on the team that he can play with, and he has another in-game leader that he can work with. Maybe he gets along better with Art. Maybe they can come to terms on things and have a good system. I think it could actually work. I mean, I think people would see it as taking a step down for Cold, but not really, not considering how well Furia's performed lately and how good some of these players look. I think it wouldn't be much of a step down. It'd certainly be an improvement to what the fuck he's been doing over with Main Brazil lately. Like, they're not doing anything. So I think him going to Furia could be good. I think the only real obstacle to that is the fact that they already have signed long-term agreements with all 5 of their players. And so someone will be getting incredibly fucked in this situation if coldzera were to come in for someone. But honestly, I'm not sure where else he could go. Not unless some other organization comes around and decides to build a national team. That's possible. I mean, you have Sunny sitting out there, you have Cajun B sitting out there, you have coldzera trying to get into another team, maybe Smooya, maybe Kiyoshima. Like, there's a lot of names you could kind of throw around and maybe create a whole new multinational team that coldzera is kind of the head of or something like that. So I guess that's another option. But if I had to guess, it's either he stays with Made in Brazil and restructures a team and kind of takes control of it, he joins FaZe, he joins Furia, or he builds a whole other multinational team. I don't see really anywhere else that he would fit. Like, there's no way he would want to go to Luminosity and play with, like, Steel and Bolts and all those guys. That would be super unlikely. I mean, Luminosity would love to have him, and he could probably make that team better, but I don't think they would be where he wants to go. I think that he would want something a little bit stronger, something a little bit, already kind of stabilized in the top 10 or near it, or maybe, like, again, a new international project that's really interesting. That seems to be the most likely cases. All in all, though, this is pretty crazy to think about how long that, Cold, Fur, and Fallen were together and all that they were able to accomplish, particularly in 2016, I guess mostly, and how they were at one time the best team in the world, winning 2 majors, getting all these top 4 finishes. I mean, they were one of the greatest lineups in CSGO history. Definitely one of the strongest core 3 in CSGO history. And so to see it possibly finally coming to an end, again, it's similar to the whole Virtus Pro thing, where they were so strong for so long, always a force to be reckoned with, and then finally fizzled out slowly but surely, one piece at a time. And it feels like this team's starting to hit kind of that same point in their lifespan. And so it just seems natural that this would be kind of the direction that things start to go. But I just want to put a video to kind of react to this and kind of give you my thoughts on it. Hope you folks enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe for more content. Catch you next time.